There are 7 unique fundamental concepts that you need to know about as it relates to your money and investing. Chapter 2 of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, focuses on how understanding these crucial concepts can really dramatically improve your overall finances. These concepts are really sort of the fundamental building blocks for creating a successful financial plan and staying committed to that throughout your life. Some of the concepts that we detail in chapter 2 of our book probably going to sound quite simple and straightforward, but don't be fooled. As Steve Jobs once said, simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clear to make it simple. So here are those 7 fundamental concepts and how they relate to your money. Number 1, time in, not timing. Look, the reality is none of us can predict the future, but far too often people find a lot of reasons out there these days to wait to prepare or invest until the timing is better. The reality is when they do this, they miss out on very valuable earning opportunities that occur over time. Far too often then, if they wait, it forces them into taking more risk later on in order to play the game of catch up. In the short term, the markets are always volatile, often moving in direct reaction to whatever that day's headlines is. In our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, we give just a few of those headlines that have occurred over the course of the past 15 years. Among them, trade wars, downgrades of the U.S. credit rating, and, of course, a global pandemic, to name just a few. Those headlines come fast and furious. The reality is, though, through all of that, being consistent would have certainly generated some pretty handsome investment results that one of the charts in the books really gets into much greater detail on. The second concept that we describe as a fundamental concept when it comes to your money and your finances is this notion of paying yourself first. Far too often, right, people only save whatever is left over. Unfortunately, that kind of nearly guarantees that you'll never sort of save enough money because it's always relegated to an afterthought. Instead, every time you get a paycheck, first set aside a portion of your savings and it's done. One of the great ways to be able to do that is by establishing a budget. We talk much more about that in chapter 4 of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. Another way, though, to implement that concept is if you're currently living sort of paycheck to paycheck, consider earmarking the total amount of your next salary increase to go directly to savings. And that way, you really do wind up being able to adopt this concept of paying yourself first. The third concept, being consistent. Now, this one applies, I suppose, in life in general and not just to your finances. At the office at Nelson Financial Planning, we actually have a poster that sort of summarizes this pretty well. And that poster says, consistency is what transforms average into excellence. I think another way to think about consistency is with the familiar direction that we've probably all heard at one point or another in our lives of to just leave it alone. It sounds easy to do, but in practice it is quite hard. To quote Warren Buffett on sort of the same subject, he talks about lethargy bordering on sloth remains the concept of our successful investment style. But my goodness, in today's world, aren't there just so many distractions that we all have to face? Average American checks their phone 96 times a day. And more often than not, when we check those phones, we see a form of some kind of distressing headline that is just happening at that very moment. And of course, the normal reaction is to try and want to change your game plan. And the reality of a plan should be that it was designed to sort of weather the next several years. And in some cases, maybe even that's a couple of decades. And all of a sudden, we see a headline that then causes us to shift a plan that we've put together supposed to work for the next couple of decades. And we're looking at these headlines, and then we start to make instantaneous decisions to decide to change everything with the plan that we have created. And I guess that underscores just how difficult being consistent is. And certainly when you think about it from an investment perspective, making reactionary decisions can certainly have dramatic consequences on your investment results. Our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents, really does go into this in much more detail, really looking at some hard data with some charts and some numbers that we share in the book. Suffice it to say, it is quite dramatic when it comes to the impact that reactionary decisions can have on your money and finances over time. The fourth fundamental concept that we talk about is this notion of diversification, right? Simply put, that is the act of spreading out your money across multiple asset types in order to reduce your risk and maximize your return. The reality of different investments is that they perform differently at different points in time. That's the whole concept, of course, of a diversified portfolio that consists of an asset mix that includes stocks, bonds, cash, and the like. Because if you have those three different components in various percentages, depending upon your risk tolerance and your ultimate financial plan, then you certainly have parts of your portfolio that, regardless of the headlines, you're going to be able to utilize to help generate out income. That's certainly the concept of diversification, and diversification's role is sort of minimizing as best as possible the risk of investing. There's no way you're ever going to eliminate that, but the concept of diversification is to spread that out so you can weather through whatever might be the headlines on a regular basis. Number 5, and I guess this is one of those common sense ones that can be somewhat tricky. We describe it as perhaps taking the opportunity to ignore your neighbor, right? You probably want to ignore what they are doing when it comes to their money and the finances and the possessions. After all, looks can be deceiving, and keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, can really be more difficult and more illusory than it appears on first blush. You know, our book features a variety of conclusions from perhaps the broadest analysis to date of millionaires and how they achieved their financial success. The study was done by Dave Ramsey and the folks at Ramsey Solutions. A variety of findings that we mentioned in our book, one of which, of course, is that 1/3 of all millionaires never made 6 figures in a single working year. So millionaires don't necessarily have to earn a lot of money. The biggest takeaway, of course, is that a staggering 94% of millionaires live on less money than they make, compared with only 55% in the general population. So some interesting statistics that support the notion of ignoring your neighbor as one of those 7 fundamental financial concepts. The next concept is for all the math fans out there, and that's the concept of compounding, which many describe as a mathematical wonder. So how compounding works is you apply a rate of return, not just sort of to the original amount that was invested, but also to the profit that accumulates and grows and reinvests each year as well. And because of that compounding effect, where every year the rate of return doesn't just apply on the amount invested, but on the amount of the earnings that you made in that prior year or in all those prior years, it's pretty powerful stuff. And our book includes some very specific examples of how straightforward it is to achieve a profit that is 32 times your original investment over a 40-year period of time. So pretty dramatic stuff in there. And lastly, in terms of those fundamental financial concepts, we're all living longer. That's the good news, and that's also the bad news, right? If average life expectancy in the United States has gone up by about 10 years over the course of the past 50 years, guess what? Those extra 10 years come with 10 years of expenses as well. So that longer life expectancy requires you to plan differently than perhaps what prior generations did. So how are you doing? Are you following all of these fundamental concepts regularly, or are you skipping over some of them? For more information about these 7 fundamental concepts and how they relate to your finances, be sure to read Chapter 2 of our book, Next Gen Dollars and Cents. You can get your free copy of our book by texting free copy to 407-791-0070. That's 407-791-0070. My name, of course, is Joel Garris, certified financial planner, certified financial fiduciary at Nelson Financial Planning, and author of the book Next Gen Dollars and Cents. Thanks for listening to this video.